On September 13th, 1969, CBS would air the first episode of Scooby-Doo Where Are You, titled What a Night for a Night. In today's video series, we'll be looking back at every episode from the original Scooby-Doo Where Are You in broadcast order. And today, let's begin with, well, the beginning. What a Night for a Night, the first episode to ever be broadcast, written by Joe Ruby and Ken Spears. But I don't know if it was the first episode to be created, though this is one of the only 2 episodes of the franchise that has a unique title card, so it is very likely that this was the first episode, maybe before the subsequent episode switched to the standard title cards. One thing that's so remarkable about this episode is that it's the first episode of a TV show that perfectly introduces its characters.
Well, gang, it looks like we're up to our armor plates in another mystery.
This is literally the first piece of Scooby-Doo media, but it doesn't feel at all unfamiliar after over half a century of Scooby-Doo content. It's still the Scooby-Doo we all know and love, fully formed. And this was necessary for TV at the time, of course, because stations needed to be able to air episodes of shows out of order and allow people to get into a show without worrying about continuity, story, anything like that. But it's still pretty amazing how everything was figured out almost immediately with this episode. Speaking of which, let's get into it. Our episode begins on a spooky night as Professor Hyde White drives a pickup truck down the road, unaware of the suit of armor in the back that has come to life and attacks the driver. We see Shaggy and Scooby walking home from the movies, which Scooby insisted to watch twice. Just then, they hear a strange noise coming from the bushes, and Shaggy makes Scooby check it out. As it turns out to be a frog sitting on top of Scooby's nose, Scooby gets annoyed and starts barking and chases the frog, with Shaggy quickly following behind. After a little trip up, they notice the same pickup truck from the intro now empty, except for the lifeless suit of armor that's now in the driver's seat, and Daphne finds a delivery slip reading "Deliver to the County Museum." So that's exactly where the gang go and deliver the Black Knight to Mr. Wickles. Once the gang make it to the County Museum, Mr. Wickles isn't glad that they brought the Black Knight to him under the circumstances of Mr. Hyde White's mysterious disappearance, and he tells the gang the superstitious tale of the Black Knight coming alive when the moon is full.
Like, wow, the moon was full last night.
As the 2 workers move the Black Knight to the medieval room, Scooby starts following them and finds a strange pair of glasses on an Egyptian animal statue. As he picks it up, the gang tell him it's time to go. The gang notice Scooby stole some strange glasses from the museum, and they go to the library to find out what type of glasses Scooby stole. To find out that the type of glasses Scooby stole are made in England, and the gang connects all the dots together in arguably the most famous scene of Scooby-Doo.
Professor Hyde White!
And the gang go back to the museum at night and break and enter the museum using a ladder system. And Shaggy, of course, the swinging gymnast in school.
Watch me swing right in. Swing, swing.
And Shaggy breaks a few things, of course, and he walks by an insanely creepy Indian effigy. It's so crazy how the gang don't get any fines for these crimes. The gang split up for the first time to look for clues, with Shaggy being safe and closing the window.
What did you do that for?
You know how that full moon turns on that Black Knight.
So as they look for Shaggy, the Black Knight starts following them. Once Scooby notices, he runs into Velma and she loses her glasses and trips up the Black Knight into a pillory. And Velma thinks the Black Knight is Shaggy and hates the way he sounds and starts to give the Knight cough medicine. Suddenly Shaggy does show up and takes the medicine and they get out of there. And we get the scene where Scooby gets jump scared by the Knight and jumps out of the flower pot. Scooby runs and finds the fossil exhibit, or in this case, the dinner exhibit. As Scooby destroys a dinosaur fossil to just get a bone, he reveals the Black Knight. Later, the gang meet up when Scooby runs back into Shaggy, but this is actually a good thing, as Shaggy finds a very mysterious clue.
Hey, like, wait a minute. There's a picture missing from the wall.
But when he shows the gang, a painting appears in a very eerie scene.
It was a minute ago.
Just when Daphne notices blood on the ground.
Blood? That's a clue.
The The gang follow the paint that leads to a room behind a sarcophagus, which was hinted earlier in the episode. Once they get inside, they figure everything out as a paint forgery scheme, as the villain is painting replicas to smuggle around the world as the real ones. Thanks to danger-prone Daphne, she finds the Black Knight, and gags ensue as Shaggy breaks into the painting and Scooby sprays paint all over the Black Knight, and the gang run away with the Black Knight in quick pursuit after Shaggy and Scooby, which he finds them hiding under a bear rug and behind a table, with his super strength lifting both Shaggy and Scooby somehow. The gang meet up and run from the Black Knight into the relic room, where Shaggy uses his ventriloquism, which makes the Knight leave for a time, just for Scooby to accidentally flip the power on, which makes the plane work somehow. And Scooby and Shaggy scream and go all around the relic room until they finally hit the Black Knight, with Scooby unmasking him. Turns out to be the only other character in this episode, Mr. Wickles, who was part of a smuggling and forgery ring. He would steal and sell the real paintings from the museum, and then create fake paintings and put those back on the wall. And that was the reason why Wickles kidnapped Professor Hyde White.
Oh my gosh, Professor Hyde White!
We never found him.
Scooby finds him, and it turns out that he was the guy inside the scary Indian effigy. And our episode ends with Professor Hyde White explaining to the gang that Wickles came up with the whole Knight story to explain his mysterious disappearance. Suddenly, the suit of armor starts moving as it's Scooby, ending us off with a very iconic Scooby-Dooby-Doo.
Scooby-Doo.
And that's What a Night for a Night, and it's great. I can see why this is what they started the show with, because they probably had other ones done. Like, we could have had Captain Color as our first villain, but no, this is what we got. The monster is ominous but not too frightening, and this episode introduces the premise and characters in their distinct formula very well. It's clear that the creators of the show didn't have a firm hold on the formula yet, and trust me, they won't for a while. And this episode really relies on gags more than setting up a mystery, but also the story of this episode is pretty simplistic anyway, even by Scooby Sanders. But this is still a great episode that holds up, and it's one that everyone knows and loves. And this episode had a huge impact on the franchise being made into made comics and games. And with that out of the way, let's introduce our ranking system. For each episode I talk about, I'm going to use the villain as our rating system. So it's going to be out of 5. So I'm going to give What a Night for a Night 3 Black Knights out of 5. So what do you think about this episode? What do you think of it as the start of Scooby-Doo? What do you think of the atmosphere, premise, and all that in between? Let me know in the comments below, and that ends our first of many videos in this series. Next up, we'll be dealing with a sheet ghost. Yeah, that guy. And with all that out of the way, consider subscribing to join this cartoon community, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!